watching Beyond Markets, where we bring you up to speed on development outcomes in Africa. I'm Kenneth Bowman. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Coming up, we'll be discussing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic across the Commonwealth countries. And you can join the conversation on social media. Let us know what you think. You can use the hashtag Beyond Markets, and the handle to you send it to is my handle is at Kenneth Bowman. And let us know definitely what you think. Now, with a combined population of about 2.4 billion people across the world, 54 member countries make up the Commonwealth of Nations. 19 of the Commonwealth member states are African countries, and I'm joined by Patricia, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, as we explore the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic across the member states. Thank you so much for your time today. And I would first like to start off by getting to understand the need for a coordinated response, across the Commonwealth.
Well, as you know, the Commonwealth is made up of 54 countries, and we come from 5 different regions. And as you rightly said, 19 of those countries are in Africa. But we have, out of the 2.4 billion people, 60% of our population is under the age of 30. And the issues in relation to employment and trade are therefore incredibly important. But right now we are faced with this terrible pandemic, which is not only putting its tentacles into the lives of all our member states, but it's also claiming many of those lives. And in its wake, it is leaving an economic, difficult situation which we now all have to face. And on top of that, we're trying to cope with the disadvantages there now are in terms of climate change. We've seen in Kenya that the floods have just taken about 100 citizens there. But we have locusts, we have desertification, we have drought, and we know that in the Pacific, they've already suffered from Cyclone Harold. And if we look towards Asia and then towards the Caribbean, we know that we are heading into the hurricane season and the season of real difficulties. So all of those issues mean that we as a Commonwealth family are having to fight very hard, and we have never needed solidarity more than we need it now. And the solidarity that's being demonstrated by all our members right across the Commonwealth, but particularly, if I may say so beneficially in Africa, is really needed. We need a multilateral, multi-sectional approach, which is holistic, if we're going to get through this. And I believe we will if we work together.
All right then, but I'm trying to understand from your perspective as well, how this pandemic shock also opens opportunities, to fast-track development in some of these least developed countries, like you rightly mentioned as well, especially in sectors like healthcare.
Yeah. Well, healthcare has what have we learned? We've learned that if we don't have health, we will not have wealth. And what this terrible period has done is force all of us to think more innovatively, more creatively. So, for example, many of our factories, and certainly you've seen this in Africa, have been repurposed so that we are now looking at what our member states need, and our members are trying again to see how they can provide the sort of facilities that are really going to make a difference. But we know too that the Commonwealth, because we share similar language, similar parliamentary structure, similar rule of law, we have a 19% advantage when it comes to trade. And 2 things have happened in the last year or so which has really made a difference. One is the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, which enables us to look at how we can together remove the barriers from making trade possible and easier between ourselves. The second, of course, is the African Free Trade Area, which was agreed and which should be coming in July. Well, now we don't know whether that may be delayed, but all our efforts need to go to making that a reality, because the prospect for Africa is that we could increase the trade in Africa by $2.5 trillion. Now that is trade that we really need. And so we know historically we haven't invested perhaps as much attention and drive into the intra-Commonwealth trade. At the end of last year, we went through the barrier of $700 billion of intra-Commonwealth trade. So that trade has been growing, and we hope that by 2030, we will have grown the trade between our member states to 2 trillion. These opportunities are opportunities we really have to take. But it's going to mean looking at our regulatory structures, looking at the level of interoperability, and looking at how we can make it smoother, easier, faster for us to trade one with another. But we are on our way. You know that the Secretariat for the African Free Trade Area has been placed in Ghana, that we, the Secretariat, had given help and support to the African Union to facilitate this, and we have committed as a Secretariat to support the Ghanaian Secretariat of the African Free Trade Area. So these are real opportunities that we are taking. And I think we should really commend what the African Union's done, led by Cyril Ramaphosa, and also what President Buhari, who has been nominated by ECOWAS to champion some of this, because that coming together, that consolidation, that solidarity has made a difference. And having my sister Ngozi and Donald Kabruka and Trevor Manuel and Tijan Tiam really committing themselves to honing in what the economic things that we should do needs to be developed, I think that's been very good indeed.
Yeah, very interesting that you mentioned the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, because definitely it's one uniting factor for the continent with regards intra-Africa trade. But then I'd like to switch over and try to understand what the focus for this year's Commonwealth Head of Governments meeting is. That's CHOGM, and which was supposed to hold in Rwanda later this year. And I'd like to understand what we can expect, especially with your engagement with the principal African actors that you just listed.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing to say is because of the travel restrictions and the need for social distancing and COVID-19 pandemic, it is not going to be possible for us to hold a face-to-face meeting in Rwanda, and that face-to-face meeting will be postponed to a date which we will agree. But we haven't stopped collaborating just because we haven't had a face-to-face meeting. So, for example, we are hosting a whole series of economic webinars, which will start on May the 11th, to look at the different aspects of the economic turmoil that we are anticipating will flow from the slowdown of trade that has taken place during this time. And all of our member states from all 5 regions will have an opportunity to participate in those. We'll also have the Commonwealth Health Ministers meeting, which is going to take place virtually on the 14th of this month. We will be holding that in anticipation of the World Health Ministers meeting, which will take place the next week. And so we will have a Commonwealth voice on economic structures that we need to put in place to respond to the COVID pandemic, but we'll also be able to have an opportunity to listen and share and work together to get a realistic and effective, practical resolution to many of our difficulties when we come for these meetings. We have webinars that have been continuing. We've been working with the WHO, and also we've created a Commonwealth Resource Centre on our website, which is thecommonwealth.org, in order to give practical, immediate support and technical assistance to our member states. I think I should say that it's not just the Secretariat, because we have 90 Commonwealth accredited organizations who are putting all of their power and energy beyond to help our members deliver a more productive and effective response to this COVID pandemic. And that's been really useful. So I hope you will have had an opportunity to look at that. We have created the coronavirus tracker, the Commonwealth price sharing database. We're looking at the Commonwealth Finance Access Hub. the Commonwealth Disaster Risk Finance Portal, which we hope will create a one-stop shop. But we're also about to launch our youth grant scheme, which we hope will be worth about £250,000. And of course, we have the Commonwealth Meridian, which is the new, really effective debt management system, which is being used by so many of our member states. And tragically, we believe that there will be a tsunami of economic consequences coming out of this pandemic. And regrettably, one of them is likely to be an increase in the amount of debt that our member states will have to manage.
Yeah, because talking about the amount of debt some countries are going to manage, does this in any way change the focus of this year's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting? Are we changing the focus to more accommodate the more recent developments and how that's going to affect the member states?
Well, the conversations that we've been having now is how do we respond to the economic tsunami that may be coming our way. There is discussion right now as to whether we have a virtual meeting of our leaders, and we are preparing to see how that could be managed and if it is the right time to have such a meeting. But the focus is absolutely on this pandemic. But as I said earlier, it is particularly poignant because there is right now an intersection between the pandemic, which is a health issue, which is going to be potentially compounded by the existential threat that is posed to many of our members by the climate crisis that we're facing. And then on top of that will be the economic issues. So those three issues are intersecting in a powerful way. And many of our member states are saying that we can't go back to the old ways of doing things. This is a material change, and that we have to think again as to how we respond to those countries who may be medium income countries or even high income countries. But as a result of the pandemic, as a result of the climate crisis, as a result of the economic tsunami, just judging our countries by virtue of the level of the GDP they have will no longer be realistic. So we have to look at what the new norm may be, because tragically we cannot guarantee that we will not have another pandemic. And we certainly know that the crises that is arising as a result of climate is getting worse and worse. And we've got to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And interdicting that climate is going to be really important. So as you may know, the Commonwealth is looking at how we can do this in a more holistic way. And we have been promoting our Common Earth approach, which is to look at a more regenerative approach to development, which takes into account people, place, and environment, so that we build an economy which is regenerative in its approach and delivers those goals in a way that's realistic, economically viable, and important. We also have to look at the issues on women, because if you look at most of our economies, SMEs, women and young people, are going to be very badly affected by this.
All right, Patricia, definitely. I just need to hold that thought a while on gender and women. We'll take a quick break, and then when we return, definitely we'll continue our conversation. I've been speaking to Patricia Scotland. She's the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and we'll continue our conversation after the break. Stick around. Now, Welcome back to Beyond Markets. If you're just joining us, Patricia Scotland is the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and she's our guest today on Beyond Markets. And we've been talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impacts across the region. You know, before we went on the break, she just started to make a very compelling case about how how the COVID-19 pandemic also affects gender. And Patricia, I'd like to look at this and looking at the public health responses that we're seeing across, and I'd like to get your thoughts on how you think we're going to address the inequalities that that plays out as well.
Well, I do think that we have to make sure that women are part of the conversation in terms of the planning. Because if you look at all the data that we have from the World Bank, I have identified that when we went through the global tsunami of economic difficulty in 2008, the consequence was that the countries who invested in their human capital did far better than those who did not. Now, if 50% of our population are women, then we know that engaging those people in our new economic response is going to be vitally important. But what we've also seen is that women have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic, in as much as we've seen a real acceleration of the level of domestic violence. Now, we have 1 in 3 women in our world, women and girls who are affected by domestic violence, and it's the greatest cause of morbidity that we have. And if this continues, if we have, as we fear, a tripling of the domestic violence figures and a doubling of domestic violence deaths during this period, then it is likely that our economic ability to do well is going to be materially affected. But in addition, if we look at small and medium-sized businesses, we know the majority of those small and medium-sized businesses are run by women and young people. And there are a lot of women and young people in the informal economy. So if they are going to be disproportionately hit, then we have to look at how we are going to address those issues to make sure that our women, our girls, our young people are not left behind. And so the Commonwealth Women's Affairs Ministers have also raised this issue with me, and they are asking the Women Affairs Ministers of the Commonwealth for a virtual meeting so that we, the ministers across the Commonwealth, can get together and to make sure that we have the policies which will enable us to cushion some of these aberrant consequences. And we have to do this. And so we in the Commonwealth Secretariat are trying to find some good time for our ministers to meet. But we are also saying that as we look at all these issues, we have to ask the question, if we are not to leave everybody behind, how do we make sure that our women, our girls and our young people are really taken into account? And so this gender lens on everything that we do is going to be really important if we're going to be fair.
Definitely, being fair is very important. And now let's talk about something else that I'm also very passionate about, which is the climate change issue you touched on a bit earlier on. And I'd like to understand how the Commonwealth is helping member countries as well to deal with the two crises as one. That's talking about the challenges on the health side and as well that on the climate change.
Well, we have seen that a number of our countries are really struggling to get the money that they need to do the adaptation and the mitigation of climate change. And in 2015, the Commonwealth came to the decision that we should try to set up a Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. And may God bless Mauritius, because they came forward and they said that they would be willing to host the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub in their country. And we were assisted by 2 grants from our colleagues in Australia of 1 million Australian dollars each, and then we had £550,000 generously given to us by the United Kingdom. Now, with this relatively small seed count money, we have created the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. We have also been able to assist our member states to make applications to the Green Fund and the other funds available for climate change. And already we have delivered more than $33.5 million into the hands of our member states, particularly the small, the vulnerable, and those in need. But we have more than $500 million worth of climate finance in the pipeline to go to our member states. And the reason this is so important is we have to assist each other to implement the things that are practical, the things that will work, the things that will help our countries to recover and fight better against this crisis. And we are seeing that we need to look at desertification, particularly in Africa. So right now, the Commonwealth is looking at creating something that we're calling the living lands, to deal with desertification, to deal with drought, and to deal with the way in which our lands are becoming degraded. You will know that in 2018, the Commonwealth launched the Commonwealth Blue Charter. And from that Commonwealth Blue Charter has come the Commonwealth Blue Charter working groups. So across our Commonwealth, our members are coming together, sharing what they know, but they're also, just as importantly, sharing everything that has not worked. So we have been saying, if one of us spends a penny, a dollar, a naira, then no other country will have to spend the same dollar or penny or naira, so that we can share our knowledge, share our expertise, and make sure that on this climate crisis, we really make a difference. And it's been significant because one of the beneficial things that have come out of this terrible pandemic is the world is starting to heal itself. Nature is starting to heal itself. So we can learn from those things and see what we can do in terms of reducing the carbon that we are producing in our world.
All right, but looking at the health side of things, though, I understand that you're calling on countries to achieve universal health coverage at this time.
I am, but we are, because one of the reasons I'm proud of our Commonwealth is 4 years ago, when I became Secretary General, the Commonwealth health ministers were already saying we need to concentrate on universal health coverage, because if a pandemic came, if an epidemic came, and remember we were looking in those days at Ebola and the other viruses that were hitting our member states, if this were to come again, what we learned is if we don't have a robust universal health coverage, then we will be less able to respond effectively. So last year, we decided that we would do two things. One was to look at how we could pool our data, and that we should try to create a Commonwealth database for procurement and equipment. And that is what we're doing right now, and we're accelerating it. The other thing we determined is that we would have to look at how we digitalize, because if we look ahead, one of the new areas for poverty, for division, will be those who are not digitalized. And if we are not going to leave anyone behind, a big question is how do we make sure that parity of treatment is available? We know that a lot of help and assistance is being given now by the Commonwealth Medical Association, Commonwealth nurses, Commonwealth pharmacists, in order to get information and data to our member states. But that information and data, because of the lockdown, is happening digitally. So a number of our countries are still on 2G, 3G, 4G. Some will be migrating to 5G. So the Commonwealth have kept a platform which will enable them to interact, but not everyone has that. So how do we make sure that our countries are able to take advantage of the digitalization that's taking place? And right now, as we are speaking, our Commonwealth civil society groups, particularly on the medical sector, are meeting virtually to come up with the sort of advice and support that we will be giving and suggesting to our health ministers when they meet on the 14th of this month. So this is a huge area for us, and universal health coverage can't just be a dream. It has to be a reality, and we have to look together as to how we convert our hopes, our aspirations into something concrete and practical that we can deliver to our member states.
All right, definitely very important there to us achieve universal health coverage. Thanks a lot for your time on the show today. Definitely been some very good insight and learning curve for me to understand what is happening across the Commonwealth and what's been playing out there. If you're just joining us, I've been speaking to Patricia Scotland. She's the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and that's it on Beyond Markets for today. And thank you so much for being a part of the show. For me and the rest of the team, have a wonderful day. And you can always watch Beyond Markets at 5 p.m. West Africa time daily, and have access to all previous episodes of the show on our website. That's at cnbcafrica.com. Have a great day.